Call a meeting to order.
Really?
Where's everybody?
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, this is a roll call. We have Mr. Whitman here tonight. Will be a voting member. John Kelly's here, Bill Bolton's here. I'm here, Sharon Penny's here. Do we have any public comments unrelated, and Eugene's here, and unrelated to the agenda? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the agenda. We're going to do these minutes. We're going to start with the November 3rd minutes.
I was here for that one.
And it's going to be easy for you tonight.
Okay, so do we have any comments or suggestions on these minutes? Does anyone need more time to peruse the minutes? I have a motion to approve the minutes as written.
So moved.
I have a second. All right, to approve. November 17th. And covered the cell tower. Any comments on those minutes? I have a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I was absent, I abstained.
Okay, we have a second.
I'll second John.
All right. Okay, if there are no objections, we've approved those minutes. Now we're going to move on to old unfinished business. Master plan follow-up with Ben.
Hey, how about December 1st?
Where's that? Did I miss that?
Wait, today's December 1st.
Okay,
Okay.
you're up.
All right, yes, my name is Ben Olson. I am from Planner at North Country Council, and I was tasked to prepare a draft of the master plan chapter for the transportation chapter. So basically, you guys all have a copy of everything? Okay. So this is the opportunity for me to get some input from all of you. I prepared this based on past studies, plans, and other research. So, and also reviewing the results of the survey that was done as part of the master plan. So I didn't have any, obviously, input from you guys. So this would be very valuable for me to create any changes or updates to what I had written. First off, is there any comments right off, or would you just like me to start going down through the list of priorities? What I'll do is I'll go through the priority list as opposed to reading through the chapter itself.
I think the idea of the highway better known as 10 Mountain Highway, is way outdated on this. There's one of these pages that tells you the traffic count. And unless I'm reading it wrong.
Well, yeah, it all depends. Some of them it all depends on what spot you're looking at, because the most recent counts, and you could be right, the most recent counts at some locations were 14, some were even 13.
Yeah, because like now they're saying somewhere between 17,000 and so on 10 Mountain Highway, and on this one I think it's 6,900.
And that was
When the cows used to cross the road.
Do you remember, John, where that number comes from? The more recent one?
I don't know offhand, but I know that they've had traffic counts up there before. They say somewhere between 16,000 and 19,000.
I'll double check that and see if there is a more. It's possible, I had gotten this from DOT's website, so they might not have updated. I can see if I can get the most up to date.
These are 2 years old at the max.
Right.
When they change,
It says 14,000 though, west of Highland Street.
Right, that's a fair amount.
That's just it's from 2013, but that might be the most recent one that DOT did.
Yeah, I guess, kind of, Bill, do you have something?
Well, actually, I did raise my hand, but I do have something. I thought that, was it Ben Sawaki, whatever? Or what's, Jeff?
Jeff.
Didn't he do a traffic study, or
It's a
Well, there were
15,000 short.
counts, there
Yeah.
were counts, but,
more recent
Oh,
than
okay.
2013?
Yeah, no, that was the access management
Yeah, that's the access
update.
management plan.
Right,
Yeah.
and see, it depends on location. It's Tenny Mountain Highway, but
Right.
it's taken at different locations, so you've got to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And they don't do all the locations every year.
Right.
So you have to kind of
Hotel did one, too,
extrapolate.
didn't they? Hotel did.
I-
Yeah, for, yeah,
They did do a traffic study for their approval.
Well, they did one, didn't they? The hotel did a traffic study, right?
Yeah, that could have been that could have been that information.
That may be what
But
we-
that was more, this is a traffic count. Traffic study is turning patterns and, I mean, there are some counts.
I just
available, but yeah,
remember that there
yeah.
being numbers in that order of magnitude in that hotel project,
A lot
so.
of times, the time of year too.
Yes,
can
it does
vary those counts.
Pretty
fluctuate.
constant. It's the only east-west coast, highway there is.
Yep.
Between here and Vermont.
Certainly. But I'll see if I can get some updated counts, see what.
You know, we have that problem in Plymouth as far as populations. When it suits
Fluctuates.
us, it's only 1,900, and when it suits us, it's 6,300. I just don't, you know,
It's a little
I'm
squirrely.
all for that. Take advantage of what you have.
yeah, I know, but
No, but I'll see, I did try to see if there was anything beyond 14, but there wasn't anything. But I'll dig around and see if there was anywhere, somebody that just.
Actually, Ben, Jim Steele he did set up those counts for the access management study, update
You're right.
that we did,
And
so we should have
that was done in
those.
13.
Was it 13?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That most recent one was done in 13, so that's where the 13 and the 14.
Oh, that's where it comes from, okay.
Yeah. Well, it didn't come from that, but that's.
But
would
that's
have
what's been plugged in,
Right.
yeah.
But I'll look and see if I can get some more current.
Yeah, I'm sure it's changed now anyway, because you've got the state liquor store in that
Oh, yeah.
plaza, so.
That'll bring some traffic.
Yep.
Was there anything else right off the bat? And please don't be shy if you have any questions as I'm reading through, certainly interrupt me.
Well, I will say something there, in the interest of not being shy. There's a lot of stuff here, and it's calling for a lot of management plans, a lot of studies, and a lot of inventories. And it's kind of,
you know,
was a surprise to me to see all this stuff in here. So that's kind of how I'm going into those conversations. So I'll let you kind of point out why we need that, and Sharon can pitch in, and maybe Bill, since he's a selectman, can say, well, we had that and didn't have that, or, because a lot of stuff on this, and these recommendations are directly, the select board's direct responsibility, and other town departments, not the planning board, so.
One thing on that, I was gonna hold on to this till later, but I think it fits now, if it's okay. I think part of it depends on whatever actions make it through the gauntlet, like make it through the planning board process. Some of these you might decide we don't want to do, but at least we had them on the table so we can talk about them.
Right.
And then we can prioritize short-term, longer-term, so we don't lose track of some of them, even if we're not going to work on them for the next 3 years. And I don't know how we're going to set up our implementation actions, but one way that I've been doing it with towns is that beyond that prioritization, who's the primary responsible? Because some of them might be the Board of Selectmen, some of them might be somebody else.
well, the other thing too is a lot of these roads are state highways.
Mhm.
So we really don't have other than maybe a suggestion, and they've already told everybody they don't have any money for the next 5 years. So, you know, some of that's controlled by the state and not by the town.
I think that's a good point, too, that some of them might not be action items unless the state approaches us or something
Right,
changes.
Right,
But
right.
it's an overview.
Right.
So we can't forget that. It's transportation, you know,
Right,
integrated.
but these are
transportation.
specific things, even though it's an overview. These are-
No, I agree, but it's the big picture look,
Yeah.
so, as a chapter.
Yeah, and certainly, certainly, if there's even the formatting of this doesn't necessarily have to be as I presented it. I mean, if I like Steve's idea too of, and I think it's how you structured your last master plan. It had a list of priorities, and it had a list of the responsible parties, primary, secondary, and whatnot, whether it be the select board, planning board, highway crew. You know, you can have kind of the literature in there with a list like that, or however you want to have it laid out. I mean, obviously, this is your plan, so your input is valuable to me to make sure you have something that you guys will use and build upon for the next few years, so. But, I mean, so I guess to start, and this goes back to your comment, John, about all the plans and stuff, you've had two access management plans for Tenny Mountain Highway over the last 10, 15 years. I think '03 was the first one, 13 is your most recent one. I do think that it looks like from looking through the two plans, some of the implementation happened by the realignment of Highland Street, the intersection, having the access to the McDonald's and the hotel be right directly across the street, so that eliminates a lot of conflict as far as traffic, and that's a perfect example of things that you can put into your land use regulations as requirements to try to, if a property is redeveloped, to try to move the curb cuts to align with others across the road, and I know that is certainly something DOT would welcome
The other
too.
thing that, as I was looking it over the other night, says advocate something about the railroad.
Yeah,
You know, it almost looks like somebody needed to have a list of so many projects, and they just stuck that in, because I don't think the railroad, they can't even make it up to Manchester to say nothing about Plymouth.
no, you're right, and
And it garbages that up a little bit for things that you probably will never do. You know, it's like saying a commercial airport in Plymouth. Let's think about that.
no, yeah, and I appreciate that, and yeah, it might look like that we're getting paid by the character
Right,
type, but that's not the fact, which is why. Certainly not the case.
Sorry about that.
No, it's completely honest, and I appreciate that. What I mean, again, like I said, I created this as an outsider looking at what you have for potential assets and how you might be able to take advantage of them. Your comments are certainly valuable for me to say that, you know, there's no use of even focusing on railroads. However, as a planning board, would it be short-sighted to completely ignore the railroads? There are some initiatives. Well, I mean, I'm not telling you that you have to invest money into tearing up the rails and rebuilding them. I know there are initiatives in the North Country to either bring passenger rail or even freight rail from Canada all the way down through Stratford, Groveton, Lancaster, into Gorham, through Cass County. So, and the state is helping out with that effort. They're not exactly sure who's going to have the priority, passenger or freight, if they're going to have utilize two different lines, but that's an opportunity where you have a rail line running through town, and it seems to be in fairly good condition. DOT has it listed as an active line.
It is
Yeah,
with the Hobo Railroad. but
Hobo
you
Railroad.
You have to try to maintain your corridor for one reason or another. You don't want to give up ownership, nor do you want it to go
Well, they have a
to
case.
rack and ruin, because it could be a rail trail. I mean, you just don't want to ignore that.
I'll shut up now, but up on the Fairgrounds Road, there was a fellow a few years ago, and he actually had gates built in so that your snowmobiles and so forth couldn't go across that railroad, or go up through the railroad. So, there's a big discussion, and there was 100 years ago when I was on the planning board, about who actually owns the railroad and who owns the land under the railroad. So I would think anybody would have to sort of get that straightened out before they get too excited about
Oh, yeah.
anything.
No, certainly, and yeah, there's issues like that.
And I don't know
Any town that
whether-
has a railroad corridor going.
I don't know whether the North Country has the same situation
Oh, yeah.
as here.
Yeah.
Because the railroad still might own some of that, so if they did, then that you wouldn't have any problem.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And in the North Country in Lancaster, there's some sections of the rail corridor that were actually sold to abutting landowners.
Yeah, it's a real hodgepodge.
So,
It is.
so you have, the state will own a couple miles,
and
then not, and then yes.
It's
So
maddening.
it's pointless to even have it. But where you might, if that case hasn't been determined yet, I mean, I wouldn't ignore everything just because of some potential issue, because it could be squared away fine. But I'm glad you mentioned that. And I don't know whether, is there a snow machine trail even near that rail line?
Sure,
There
goes
is,
right up
okay.
it.
Oh, so they do use
They
that.
go right up from all the way up to Warren.
Really?
And in fact, actually, you can connect right out here next to the covered bridge on Smith Bridge Road and go into Canada,
No kidding.
so.
But, that's a perfect example, as Sharon said, don't ignore the corridor, because it could be, if it's not utilized for rail, it could be utilized for another economic development tool. So,
I think that's all leased to the snowmobile clubs.
yeah, they have to. All
But
right.
it's still a transportation corridor per se, so.
And that might be something that I can include in that under railroads, whether, if development of rail isn't possible, consider transforming to a multi-use recreational trail system.
Is there anything here about airport? Did you mention that at all?
I did, yeah. And a lot of my focus on the airport, I looked through the master plan, airport master plan, and I didn't quite, has that been adopted yet? Because what was on the website, it was listed as a draft.
Wasn't there a final draft that was submitted?
Frank,
Wasn't it
Frank,
approved?
you know
or
it.
something like that?
I'm not sure, because I wasn't handling that, Ann was. I think it's real close.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
Frank,
got
Frank,
a
you
couple
should know
times.
all that.
Yeah, I went to the meetings, but as far as it be officially adopted at the town level, the feasibility study which generated the airport master plan was
Yeah.
completed. But it's in that format that's not, doesn't provide the town or the business community the means to move forward to see the appropriate development of the airport or the air system.
I know the town gives so much money towards the airport every year, and there's a lot of planes up there now.
Is there?
Yeah, there are.
Well, yeah, so most of my focus on that was to adopt the soon-to-be adopted airport master plan by reference into this one. That way you're consistent. It makes no sense to try to recreate something that's already
right,
there.
right.
And it did seem to be, there was a lot of valuable information in that, and it had some good.
It was to quantify where we were going in
Yeah,
the future.
yeah. And I think
in terms of scope of
Yeah.
expansion.
And it laid out some good focus, that the hangar building, potentially some fuel distribution to gain some revenue. Again, and you'll hear me probably recite some examples from the North Country where I'm from, just because they're on the top of my head. But, I mean, we have a regional airport in Whitefield, the Mount Washington Regional Airport, that's supported by multiple towns, and they're going through some restructuring there, and they're having the same thing as far as potential fuel distribution and hangar space or terminal space, and trying to grow or at least stay in existence now for potential growth later on. If you completely let that just go, it'll be difficult, if not impossible, to get it back. So that was one of my biggest focuses, was to do what you can to at least maintain it,
Yeah.
even if it's as is, as an airport, and keep your permits, because once you lose it, it'd be almost impossible to get it back. And that way you can slowly grow from there based on some of those recommendations from the Stantec plan. But we'll just start to go back to the top on talking about highways. There was the Tenny Mountain Highway. I mentioned the access management plan, again, similar to the airport master plan. instead of reciting everything that was just created a couple years ago, you can reference that Tenny Mountain Highway Plan, potentially lists, and I don't know how much you've acted upon that to update your regulations recently, but none.
Yeah.
So there might be some opportunity there to make sure there's some requirement as far as realignment of driveway accesses or shared driveway accesses. So some verbiage about creating some pedestrian and bike paths, walkways connecting some of those properties. I know Sharon at the TAC meeting during the.
But again, isn't
plan.
that state?
It's DOT, but it's still.
Well, but just because a development is happening on a state highway doesn't
Yeah,
mean
you have
you're
to-
completely out of the loop.
Like
You still
Riverside
have-
Landing, we pushed for internal pedestrian circulation to hopefully connect to a bigger realm at some point on 25.
On this, so on the first bullet, I think it's awesome to have that in there. We've been through this twice. We've invested a lot of our volunteer hours. We haven't changed the regulations. The second bullet, updating a plan that we're not implementing, I'm less excited about. Like, I think if we don't keep the first bullet, why update the Tenny Mountain Highway plan? The stuff that we could do on the land use side that you noted is our responsibility. It's not DOT's responsibility, and we haven't done it. So I think we need to do that and keep, and I like the third bullet, just having these conversations, really thinking about not endlessly adding driveway cuts to this highway.
Because the Tenny Mountain Highway Access Management Plan, DOT was a part of that, too. So
Right.
they have some.
Paid for it
Yeah.
the first time,
Right.
well, actually the second time.
So they have some buy-in into that, and I can't imagine it, I mean, it would be kind of a slapping themselves in the face for them to ignore
We
some of
also,
it.
we also have a Tenny Mountain Master Plan,
Yeah,
so, that, that should probably be improved.
I think that's this.
That
Yes,
is that,
I think it's
yeah.
this. This is what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant.
Yeah, we did with North Country Council.
Hmm?
We did it with North Country
Yeah, I know.
Council. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
so, I could certainly pull out some specifics out of that might be valuable to focus on first for updating your regulations if you'd like, and that can be part of, your first steps for prioritizing some of those things, if that might be something that would be useful.
As we said, or I have said before, not necessarily to this board, but to previous boards, DOT has their standards for access management, but they're always inclined to listen to the host community, especially if you have more stringent regulations, and that's where we come
Yeah.
in and say, yes, we'd like to do this because we have too many curb cuts
Right.
and no internal circulation. So,
So while we're on this topic, pedestrian access and sidewalks. So when I first came on the board, particularly the developments on Tenny Mountain Highway, every time there was a sidewalk on the plan, the developer said, oh, well, we don't really want that because it doesn't go anywhere. So so all the developers are off the hook, no sidewalks, basically. And I think we need to find a way around that conundrum, because just, if you say, well, I'm not gonna build a sidewalk because my neighbor doesn't have one on this side, and I don't have a neighbor on this that doesn't have one, then no one's gonna have sidewalks.
that goes in your site plan regulations, and philosophically in your zoning ordinance, just to create the opportunity for encourage whatever the verbiage is, but we need to plug that into our site plan regulations, which, as you've heard me lament, are ancient and Swiss cheese, so.
You mean require sidewalks under these certain conditions?
Right. On this, we also, a few years ago, when I was on the planning board, they did some of the road on what I call Highland Street, and supposedly they had appropriated money to finish that. But that seemed to die along the vine, because I haven't heard anything about,
Well,
and it looks like
there was some,
Bosnia
Still
over
money,
there.
yeah,
allocated.
there's some.
Still money allocated and.
Yeah, so why don't they do it?
Well, there was, I believe, way
Starting
back.
next year.
Some
Next paving season.
misappropriation
Go on.
of funds. You're talking about repaving, John, or sidewalks?
The last phase of.
Both of them.
Well, we've asked for sidewalk money in a grant through DOT, the Transportation Alternative Program, to finish that up, all these missing pieces or pieces that are obsolete or, so that's one aspect of it, and there are some monies earmarked to finish Highland Street. I think way back, some of the initial monies, if I understand correctly, didn't go where they should
They got
have.
shoved out to Merrill Street. That's what happened.
So, but that's on the horizon.
All right. So moving down, I know there's, and I think it might have come up during this master plan talk, there's some discussion about the parking on Main Street, whether there's a lack of or not. So there is, I know that Tara's working on a parking study to try to just get a count for what's there. There is right now a base of the parking that's available along Main Street and within roughly maybe a quarter-mile area. It stretches from basically Rite Aid down to Merrill Street, down behind Main Street along the railroad area. I can't remember what that street's name is.
Green Street.
Yeah, and then up Merrill Street and down what connects Merrill to Highland. Some of the other side streets too. Anyways, just to identify the areas that there are currently parking, what the restrictions are, whether it's parallel, angled, and also potential areas where there might be, the roadway might be wide enough to allow some extra parking along the side of the road on some of those side streets, such as Merrill. If it's, because it wasn't identified on any signage along those streets, whether it's possible or not. So there is a base count created now, and after the holidays, to get a true count, North Country Council is going to have somebody go out and start counting what spaces are in some areas are taken and whatnot. Just get an idea what spaces are being used. If there's any way to maybe sign better to push people to a different area parking, and to see how that works out, and maybe give the town a better idea of what your parking needs might be. Some of those issues might, there could be some potential for some, and I think this is listed in here. There might be a separate parking chapter. Yeah, some of the other potential things could be some shared parking amongst businesses. You have businesses that have differing hours of operation. Maybe there can be some cooperation or partnership, whether lease spaces or not, so they don't have to, so there is extra parking, or they don't have to develop as much land. Maybe closing up some of those curb cuts that are wide open. You could create more on-street parking and better traffic flow, because you don't have a wide curb area for cars to go in and out, which can create some issues. So that is one thing that's going to be looked at in that parking study. So hopefully by late winter, early spring, there'll be some numbers for you guys to look at.
Is there any way we can have a map to show so that visually we can talk about it instead of by print?
Yeah, no, definitely, that'll be the plan. Actually, I was the one that did the base count, and some of it might be a little off, kind of hard walking down the sidewalk and hitting all the counting spaces without going dizzy, so it's plus or minus a couple, I'll be honest. But there is a map, showing, and we broke it up into certain sections, so, one side of Main Street, might be a section of 20 spaces that will count, but it'll all be highlighted, so you'll be able to actually see the sections like Zone 1, and this is what the counts are on Zone 1 and Zone 2, so we'll make sure that's available to you.
Steve?
I did this thing you just talked about, I already did that.
Oh, you did?
It's all in multicolored graphics, but we did it by ownership. You have federal parking, you have state parking, and then you have municipal state parking, and then you have private ownership. And the inventory started from Parker Street and ended up at the Baker River, from Green Street up to Summer Street.
Really?
All the village commercial zone area.
What year was that, Frank?
I believe it was 1990.
Yeah, so you see some changes,
Yeah.
but.
And I had it all, because the problem is, you have 116 businesses on Main Street, that's 330 cars, there's 280 spaces available. And when you look at the demand capacity, physical spaces available, we just can't get all the customers and the business owners in. So obviously, there's several sites that are lend themselves to develop as parking. The whole process there is, it's a public-private partnership.
Right.
And it gets very confusing, and so the issues of trying to coordinate with a private owner of property would be able to enhance parking. You know, it's very costly. So people can't get past the concept of the design part of the parking versus the administrative and legal elements of coordinating this between the town, who owns part of the property, and other business owners who own abutters. So it's died on the vine. The other problem is our village commercial zone has no regulation, no requirement for parking other than a recent addition to have parking for residential spaces. But the problem is getting past that is the political will of indicating to the business owners that they have a requirement to acknowledge that they don't have enough parking.
Yeah.
This town of Plymouth is very similar to Concord. We have the river, railroad, and Rockledge.
No.
The difference is Concord business community came together and said, hey, we have a problem,
Right.
not a room making, and they got a $6 million garage.
Right.
The town of Plymouth determined they didn't have a parking problem.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and maybe this count will help have that
A
indication.
good start, if you want a good baseline map, is the police department have it because they have all their meters numbered out.
Okay.
So they have the map indicating all metered spaces.
All right.
So that's a good baseline start for
Or at least showing those
controlled
metered
spaces that are controlled by the.
I did call them, they didn't say, because I can't remember what I know, I called them before I came down to count parking spaces, because I wanted them to know that if there was some funny guy walking around with a clipboard, it was a valid reason, well, seemed to be valid.
And the other issue is with parking in particular, for compliance issues when you're doing a construction and operation,
Yeah.
the downtown area has 4 zones. Each one of those zones has a different requirements for setback. So Green Street's agricultural, you have a 30-foot setback, I can get 2 cars in that.
Right.
You know,
So when you go through all of the laws, rules, regulations, codes, and standards for parking systems, which I did, and try to see how we're going to actually connect the desire for increased parking, but have the rules or codes or standards that have to connect with it in order to be effective, we had some issues that needed to be discussed.
So for parking, your regulations, parking, you have to, the same setback for structure, parking is required within that setback too? Is that what you're saying?
No, like
No,
village
there's-
commercial zone, there are no setbacks.
Variables.
Right, but you were mentioning in the agricultural district.
Agricultural, there's a 30-foot setback from the boundary line.
So parking has to be outside that setback?
That's right, cannot be within
Right.
that 30 feet, yes.
Right.
Unless you get a variance,
And
but
so,
depends on the zone.
the whole process of trying to actually facilitate and increase our parking system, the biggest thing is my first part was trying to focus on getting the employees and the business owners off of the Main Street customer parking system.
Good luck
Okay?
with that.
Let's just go
I
for
know,
that.
I understand that.
Yeah, you've got that,
Yeah.
Lancaster, it's the same deal.
You know, trying to get the political will of the business community on board to acknowledge that we need to address this issue by even acknowledging that there's a problem
Right.
is step number 1.
Well, hopefully this will do that. I'll call the PD.
Yeah, they would have some stuff, like I
We
said,
also have got to change that zoning. I think the zoning would be the first line that we've got to discuss, because if that's, and that is agricultural down there. There hasn't been a cow walked across there for the last 50 years, but it's still agriculture, and every time that somebody talks about rezoning, that dies on the vine, every time. So that you're not gonna do anything down there until you get the zoning
No,
straightened
that's,
out.
rezoning is a difficult issue.
Yeah.
I know.
But this is just to quantify what we have, so we can make some informed decisions about what we need.
But no, I'm glad that, would there be any possibility to get a copy of what you had done even?
I'll go up and look and see what I've got.
Yeah, I don't know where it would be here, Frank, if it's that old.
Yeah, it's old, but
Don't
the
kill
idea
yourself.
that I went through all the federal,
Yeah.
state, and municipal laws, rules, regulations, codes, and standards to find specifically any element that dealt with the design, operation, and the emplacement of a parking space, okay? I design airports, so that's why I got into that. But so the issues we have is a person comes in to apply for an application to land use, and we have some of our site plan codes that are in conflict with the other type of code systems we got. So, you know, people aren't aware, and it makes it very difficult.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. I also do planning for the town of Lancaster too, so I know what Sharon goes through, I know what you guys go through, so I certainly understand where there's those inconsistencies, and one regulation can change without the others being considered, and it's a quagmire.
Yep.
We deal with that all the time. Okay, well, let's move on. So, talk about parking. And I know, I put down develop plans for sidewalk additions and renovations, and I know you guys do that already because Sharon has shown us, at least North Country Council plans for Highland Street, and I know there's other ones obviously in place, and those are on the mind, but it's more, you know, if you don't put something in your master plan, then it might not be thought of as important anymore. So it's, you know, even if you're already doing it, if it's not completed yet, it's always good to keep it in there, I feel. But
Can we, on that one, could we add neighborhoods? Because some of the neighborhoods, I think, could benefit from the renovations if they were part of an inventory, you know. When the road gets repaved, do the sidewalks get fixed as well?
The new residents, the new residents made accommodations for, crosswalks and such.
Yeah, I'm thinking about just it says downtown, but thinking about the adjacent neighborhoods that already
I know.
have sidewalks.
And Avery Street was like on the short list, and we're waiting for money for that too. I mean, so yeah, I guess or side streets would be kind of like good to put in.
Yep.
Yeah, so if it's in here, if we're going for grants or anything, we can say
I know when PSU started that dormitory building, that's one of the things that I stressed. It's like, okay, well, you have a sidewalk to nowhere, so let's make it go somewhere, and they did.
Yeah.
Which was great.
on the building over here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 6-story thing or 7-story.
No, I can add, residential neighborhoods.
Yeah, like maybe with your,
Definitely.
The bridges, did you mention that?
Yeah, I'm getting to that. I'll try to, I apologize, I'm jumping up
Let's
and
stick to
down.
the plan.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
okay,
Otherwise we'll be
because
in-
we'll
I
be in
just saw the
circles.
sidewalks and then
No, I know. That.
I'm not
So,
excited about bridges yet.
We're the fifth bullet.
hey, sidewalks is after bridges.
I'm not sure if you guys utilize a road surface management system to.
No, we should, but we don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's
recommendation.
and they don't have to be very complicated ones.
What is it?
Basically, it's an
It's a
inventory.
triage, it's a triage inventory.
Yeah, it's an inventory of your road surfaces, so, and however you want to, it can be completely unique to your community. You rate a roadway based on the asphalt surface, whether there's just a few cracks, whether there's really scaling on it, whether there's huge chunks chipped out. And you can identify it per, tenth of a mile, quarter mile, half mile, however you want to do it. And it gives you a baseline to understand what roads might be in need of work and how you can budget that.
It's a DOT program. I know our highway manager is really getting well organized in terms of prioritizing projects. We have a lot of streets, as we know, that are in failure. and the underlying, water and sewers and everything's in failure, drainage is in failure, but I think perhaps in a bit of time, he might be amenable to this, because this would only help complement his capital improvement plan perspective, and it really is good, because, I mean, it's an engineering template standard, and it's like boom, 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 it rates everything, it's really.
Is there anything that says what type of construction a road has to have? And the reason I'm asking that is, like, they seem to hit and miss a lot of times. We have a road known as Bartlett Road, and about 4 years ago, they had excavators, they had bulldozers and everything else doing it, but they didn't, all they did is scratch the top, or a lot of times they just repave over the top. And back 30 years ago, there were some trees still in the middle of the road around here, because they didn't do it.
Right.
And now all of these rocks and trees and everything are coming up. So to do a road right, you gotta go down about 6 to 8 feet.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
wow.
But they don't do it.
Well,
And
it's-
it's just wasted money, because a year later, it's
Yeah, but-
gone.
I flip a coin, you either like replace it kind of cheaply, with like a top coat, or go down a
Yeah.
few inches, or do the whole thing, which would be like.
But sometimes you
$1
have to,
million
and this is what DOT does, sometimes you have to put a patch or a shim coat on just to maintain the integrity of travel. They know it's just a Band-Aid,
There is
but-
no integrity of Bartlett Road.
Well, no. But is that class 6?
No.
No.
No, it's just poor planning.
It could be.
Okay,
Well, and
it's a corduroy road.
And there's certainly roads everywhere that. I'm sorry.
The reason I have it, you have road repair classification, and you do it as necessary for the surface course. Road reconstruction is when you go in and have to
Yeah.
redo drainage and
Yeah.
basis.
Box it out.
So it's all depends on how it's been
Yeah.
classified as what they want to do.
What I'm saying is they're wasting a lot of money for this skim coating, because they do it
Yeah,
every
but
2
it's
years.
better than not having it impassable. I mean, Joe is really developing a capital improvement plan. He's really trying to get it organized, but it's so hard because you have to maintain the roads for travel while at the same time, trying to do major overhauls, so
Yeah,
we're getting there.
And the kind of jump, you made a good comment, but it's just down a bit. There's opportunity, if there's a road that's in need of severe work, and also, as Sharon said, maybe your water, your sewer, your drainage needs some work, that's a perfect opportunity where your water sewer budget and your highway budget can partner up. You can save a few bucks because you're doing the same, you gotta excavate to lay down new pipe. Well, you can excavate a little more to box out that roadway, put in new material, take out all the trees and logs and all substandard material, and then rebuild it over. So that's having that foresight between the departments too. I'm not sure how well your departments.
Well, this is Plymouth
Communicate.
Village, it's a water district,
Okay.
so, but we're affecting coordination.
Well, and I think I'm comfortable with the rest of the actions under highway, if that helps, but I think you have that in here, coordination
Yeah,
with other departments. I mean, this is all just good, best management practices related to
Yep.
highways.
Well, and then I can go down, that was a great segue into bridges.
Having sat in your seat and trying to help you out.
Appreciate that. I don't think I did that when I was when I should have been helping you out. So unless you have any other questions on highways.
SADES.
It's SAGE, it's written in here, I can never remember all these acronyms. It's similar to the road surface management system, but it's a more all-encompassing inventory of anything within or under the roadway, such as culverts, sidewalks. And it's a system that, again, DOT is developing. They've tested in a few other communities. And I think when that comes online and more widespread, it's a perfect opportunity to keep things.
We really are, I always have advocated for, but we are really trying to get in line with North Country Council and the TAC to get priorities up to DOT and up through, the food chain so they can be funded. Really take advantage of that because there's the town's at a place, as are most towns of this age, in its history where, the infrastructure, it's cyclical and all of a sudden everything's in failure all at the same time. That's just the way things go, so. We're trying to utilize any federal and state monies that we can.
So before we move on to bridges, so Bill, what's the select board doing about all this stuff? I mean, you guys have your own plan, I mean.
About what,
Well,
roads,
all
jet
the,
bridges,
you know, the road
culverts?
management system, the capital, you know, how you doing 10 years ahead, or what, all that stuff, do you guys have that covered?
Well, as far as like a concrete plan, you know, I think it's based on, you know, what funds we can acquire to do kind of like outlying roads, based on federal funds availability. Then we get the $2 million kind of infrastructure bond that we're able to do a lot of like downtown roads, and it's basically based on, you know, Joe's assessment. Maybe not with adherence to our SMS, but, you know, he's quite aware of what culverts are shot
So you just depend on Joe to bring things up as they need to
in
come
the
up.
district,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, that's pretty, but this $2 million bond has been very helpful because the name of the game, unfortunately, with highways and infrastructure is catch-up. Everything is, you know, it's time. You can't, it's timeliness. Everything, you know, needs attention right away, and that's where you have to triage, and that's where you start losing stuff and losing momentum, so.
Is that for, on Tenny Mountain Highway and 3A on those rumble strips? Was that part of the $2 million?
No, that was, that was
DOT.
DOT's fiasco. So, yeah.
Okay, bridges.
All right, bridges, so,
Yes.
from what I could tell, your bridges are pretty good.
They had a major bridge about, I would say, 7 to 10 years ago. Frank probably knows about it too. And we did a lot of bridges on the back roads. I know of 3 or 4 that they did.
Well, from what I could determine, and you guys can correct me, I think there's only, in the town of Plymouth, there's only 6 bridges that belong to you, and the rest are.
There's a lot of, yeah, the rest are
DOT.
state and
We did 3 of
federal.
them.
So,
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's a great opportunity for you. So, of those bridges, it's great to include those in your capital improvement plan. I'm assuming that they're inspected by DOT every 2 years, and you get those reports. You can use those as a way to prioritize bridges in your capital improvement plan. Utilize DOT's Bridge Aid program if you ever need to repair one or replace one. And if you have a capital reserve fund also in place for that, that's also a good way of saving, putting some money in the bank every year for
The
potential.
only problem I find on that is, and it happened on some of our back roads that no one ever sees, and like one instance, they because they had that co-mingling funds with the state and with the town, they put in $1 million bridge on some back road, and what they did is they said, oh, okay, we'll pay 80% of that. So the town could have gotten along with, you know, I know, a lot less money for a bridge. And because they had some assistance with it, they blew it all the way out.
No, and that's a valid issue. There is the possibility, though, that if it's your bridge and you have the money in your capital reserve fund, you could do it yourself. And there are some companies that can engineer and construct all at once and save you some money. And if your highway crew, if your public works department is crafty, they can do some of the work themselves. You know, as long as it's not a, you know,
Big one.
50-foot.
It's a short span.
Yeah, I mean, if it's
Yeah.
like a box culvert or
box
something like that,
culverts.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a pretty, and you probably could do it cheaper on your own than if you had to come up with the 20% sometimes. So, but some of those companies, I know Michicorp in Hennecker, who does precast,
Right.
That's what this one was.
yeah, they can do everything from permitting to engineering and to help with the construction. And you can hire your own contractor if you do it yourself. So there's opportunities for you to do that. And I can include, I can put that little tidbit in there too for you guys to think
Yeah,
about.
probably a good idea.
Decide the scale of,
Exactly.
Construction.
And you can talk to DOT and say, what's this gonna cost us? Is our 20% gonna be more than
Right, doing it
doing it all
ourselves.
by ourselves? So,
Well, this actually happened. There was another bridge, and the owner decided he didn't want it to have one of those, modern bridges in front of his antique house.
Yeah.
And they actually did it in planks and so forth, and it
Oh.
didn't cost hardly anything.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of wacky bridges too. I don't know if it's like worthy of mentioning or not. We got that bridge that's like half owned by Bridgewater and by Plymouth.
Oh, God, yeah,
There's
that's,
also a bridge out on Chason Road, which I think is entirely in Rumney, but still it was access to,
It washed out, didn't it?
washed out like, what, 10 years ago, 15,
Yeah,
20
yeah.
years ago? I have no, aspect of
Long
time
before
now.
you came.
So I don't know if that's worthy of mentioning or not. It's
No, it
another
is.
egress to Rumney, which is like, probably not, people are clamoring to do that, but anyway, two bridges that should probably meet some kind of like mention.
They're both,
No, that's.
they're
I'll
both
look at that.
bridges that are really, I don't know what the traffic count is on them, but anything over 2, I'd be surprised.
obsolete.
Well, that would be a perfect opportunity to do it yourself and not
Yeah.
spend millions of 20% or so. Some of the other stuff is, advocate for bridge projects in the 10-year plan, going back to the highway part, the SAID system, inventory your culverts, what the size of them, what they're made of, the condition of them, and if it comes time that you need to replace them, consider upsizing them. With all the severe storms that were happening, doesn't make sense to just put the same old
Right,
8-inch
right.
when
It's good to
you
see
need a
that.
14 or 16.
Because of
There's been an
climate
election,
change.
there is no global warming, there's no flooding, so.
Yeah.
We're all set.
Now the seacoast is safe. Yeah. All right, so sidewalks. We talked about this a little bit, create connectivity throughout the sidewalk system, and I know Sharon's been developing that plan along Highland Street and some of the outlying residential neighborhoods, and try to continue up Highland Street. And if there's any way to create some sort of a path along Tenny Mountain, whether it's a sidewalk system along the road or somehow behind, I mean, that's a perfect loop to, go Main Street, Highland, Tenny Mountain, and around. So that would be a great opportunity. I mean, it's long range, but that's what
The
planning boards are
problem, the
for.
problem I find in today's world is that everything has to be 100% as though you were in New York City. Back years ago, they used to have a dirt path along the side of the road, and people walked along it and didn't cost a heck of a lot. But now you gotta have street lights, and you gotta have all this other stuff, which is okay as time goes by, but, towns probably, that have a limited budget, and up in this part of the country, they all do, that, a lot of this could be implemented with a lot less money.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's anything that says you have to have streetlights. I mean, maybe in certain areas, yes, but if you were creating a nature path through the woods, you certainly don't have to.
The more people move up from the south, that have been used to a lot of this, they require that.
Right.
So you sort of, unless you fight it, then you've got to go along with it.
For the master plan, if we have some long-term goals in here, I don't know how it turned out in the survey with the question about the alternative access to the high school. But when the water and sewer upgraded the water and sewer line along the Baker River from the Hannaford shopping, like it's basically halfway to Main Street and it's almost like a road.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we identify that, if there were funding, if we could get DOT funding or pathways funding, that would be an interesting path that would get you off the highway corridor, but would do the same connection you were talking about.
And that's a pedestrian path you're talking about?
People
You
biking,
have to have an access, right-of-way easement, but,
we could work that out, but right now it goes from the community gardens to Hannaford.
oh,
And
yeah,
a lot of
no,
us use it.
I mean, you're right, the
Yeah.
construction's
It
already
doesn't need to be
done.
fancy. With
No.
John, it could be very basic, but if
Yeah.
that could ever happen, and maybe part of that could be an additional or emergency access, I don't know, but.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand with my
Your-
desire for a
your-
tunnel
Yes, your bridge.
under, Tenny Mountain Highway, so that it'll
Hey.
take that and go across up to Baker and across the bridge.
They're not
love
gonna
it.
do that until somebody gets killed, and that snowmobile, one of these times, it goes right over Tenny Mountain Highway.
Bolton
Yeah.
Tunnel.
Yeah, well, if you have a tunnel or a big culvert, but
Yeah.
then you could do it.
Right.
But when those snowmobiles come up out of that little valley onto that road, somebody's gonna get it one of these days.
That's true, the Bolton Tunnel would solve that problem right there.
Then people from fairgrounds could get to the high school.
Let me get that.
But I agree with Steve, I guess it's worth mentioning that path.
It's like
It's
sewage
basically in
farm.
existence, it's being used.
To
Half of
utilize
it's already
it.
built.
So it goes from Hannaford's on Tenny Mountain Highway
to Route
to...
3.
South side, yeah.
Yeah, along the south side of the Baker River.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll take it. yeah.
Where does that end up? In the field in there?
It ends
Right
up
to the
right at
back of the
right at the community garden,
Yeah.
and then it ends up at the backside of Marshall's, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's handy.
And that is a possible alternative entrance to the high school too.
I wondered, yeah.
It's getting
yeah.
there. It's getting
And
close.
actually Alex was kind of like sympathetic with that, it'd be kind of a nice use of his property.
Interesting.
Versus my other idea, which is create a bridge and call it New Ward Bridge and go right across the river to
They
Tenny
had
Mountain Highway.
that, they had that years and years and years ago.
Old Ward Bridge.
So,
That's why they gave it up.
that, you're talking that that pathway as pedestrian or potentially for
At least,
for vehicular?
at least it's more likely to have a pedestrian
Just to
bike.
get.
A multi-use
pedestrian
trail.
access off 25, because
It
that's.
could, I mean, it could go the Gorham route, the town of Gorham's pedestrian path that's also there, emergency vehicle bypass.
That'd be a little rough on the vehicle though.
What's that?
That would be a little rough on a vehicle though, actually.
Yeah, unless you paved it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also part of the Heritage Trail system.
That's right.
So I helped lay that out, and part of our master plan from decades ago was to develop the Baker River as a ecotourism. Part of that, of course, included people getting walking or physical access to it.
Yeah.
So I think your inventory of all of your transportation infrastructure provides the planning board a great opportunity for off-site
Yeah,
mitigation
yeah.
for developers to come in. And if there's an issue with the developer's use of the land that's going to impact and will always impact some form of transportation to the town, you would have a list of projects that you could say, it would really be helpful if you included this in as part of your plan, either sidewalk system or interconnections or whatever, but you can refer to the master plan as to something you didn't just make up. It's something that's been planned, and the citizens of the town have, over the years, said, we'd like to see this happen. So they'd make a good list of.
Isn't one of the pump stations, sanitary pump stations down in that area?
Yes.
No, there is a mention, it might be a couple times, just stating that, require developers to pay their fair share of any improvements, and that goes kind of along.
Yeah, offsite. I mean, we do have an impact fee on the books, but it hasn't ever been utilized to any great extent nor fleshed out. So it's easier to say quid pro quo.
Yes, sometimes those things are good to put in regulations, but they can be difficult to enforce too sometimes, so that's
Yeah.
why, yeah.
It's easier to have a conversation, I think.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, so I'll put that in there and even reference
Thanks,
other
Steve,
areas.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Where that,
So I didn't know if that was, once the construction was over, if that was kind of disassembled, or, you know what I mean?
I mean, it's
Rock
like a
barriers.
12-foot wide gravel road
Oh,
for half
yeah,
of
and
it.
it's still
Where's
there,
that?
and there's no
Oh, yeah.
barriers or anything?
Behind, like the route we're talking about, behind Marshall's and
Yeah,
behind the
yeah,
high
yeah.
school.
When they put the
came
new
in to
bridge
do all
in,
the
John?
work, they
Yeah.
did a substantial,
Oh, yeah,
like, road bed.
Yeah.
what was the work that was done for that?
They had to upgrade the sewer line, right?
Yeah.
For
The
the
pump station
school?
too.
Now, out to Tenny Mountain
Out to
Highway.
Tenny.
Yeah, it was a section that they were upgrading.
It's almost across from Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Might hit that on the way home.
Yeah, if you're headed east, you could see it. It's right after the light at Hatch Plaza, headed east, and
Yeah.
it
See it
slopes
drop
down, but you
down.
could see it. It's quite well built. I didn't know if that was obsolete or temporary or.
Okay.
Good.
All right, so we'll move on. We kind of hit on parking. Public transportation, there was a couple of things. I mean, you have a great asset in the Concord coach line, having two stops here. I
Absolutely.
mean, we used to have it going through Lancaster, and it only goes to Littleton now, which still isn't bad, but Having that, stopping two times a day, heading to Concord, Boston, that's wonderful. So I would, not much you can do about that other than, continue to advocate for their service and try to stay on top of whether they're thinking about changing that, even cutting back. I think that would probably be a select board task. I wasn't sure, are residents allowed to
Yes.
ride up? They are, okay.
Yeah, it's very
not clear.
underutilized.
No, and it's kind of like,
We've
it's
gone
to
round
be
and
negotiated, I
round about
think,
that,
exactly what
Yeah.
is going to be available for residents and also the bus service
Oh.
themselves. How often do they run?
Yeah.
How many, what frequency?
Kind of a lack of,
It's a good recommendation, because
Yep.
there needs to be some discussion.
Yeah, because I think that's a perfect opportunity for
oh,
people.
it is, because it's underutilized.
Yeah, yeah.
And they also have got a new president in the university,
right.
so it's
And I-
a perfect time.
Well, Patsy Kendall, now I forget the name of, what's the?
It's here,
Patsy-
Transport Central.
Transport
That's
Central.
the
Third one,
next,
yeah.
Wow, everybody knows but me. Where is it?
It's the third
I wouldn't have
bullet.
known it unless I wrote it, so don't worry about it.
We cheated.
So I actually been like sitting down with Patsy, she's been having a couple meetings and stuff to include Burks and a representative and to try to like coordinate her plans with more of a regional kind of thing. And
Well,
go outside of Plymouth too.
Well, and that's, I just kind of hit on those three, Concord Coach, the PSU service, and then Transport Central is just assets to the community that you should try to make sure you don't lose and do what you can to advocate for expansion or coordination. I don't know what else you could do beyond that, but does Transport Central come to the town for a special request every year? That's always a good thing to.
How does that work out when that guy has the kayak sitting there? Isn't it is that in the bike, in the bus stop area?
No,
no, that's another one of those
spots that are leased.
odd, different, and unusual previous agreements,
Well,
yeah.
but every year
It's a vendor,
It's
it's in
renegotiated.
perpetuity and a vendor.
Part of the
No, not in-
transportation
Well, no.
infrastructure for a commercial business.
Yeah. And it's non-motorized boat storage.
Given the fact that the town of Plymouth is the only town in the state of New Hampshire that has all 6 modes of transportation infrastructure within its bounds. The only other cities that have it is Concord, Manchester, and Portsmouth. All 6 modes
We have
of
a lot
transportation.
underutilized.
One additional thought I had related to public transportation, and I don't know if this is something we want to put in or we can let it ride, but a couple of years ago, with a different administration at campus, we advocated for setting up a car share in Plymouth, and the rationale was the campus was trying to get away from having a fleet of vehicles that sit there, and a car share, they would just pay when they use them. There are a lot of us that are self-employed who could get away with not having a second vehicle if we could go online and, whether it's through Enterprise or Zipcar, whoever, it doesn't really matter, and students wouldn't have to bring a car. Because if they're involved with the university, they can do a car share, because if they crash the car, they don't graduate. Like, there's a way of recourse. So it's not like a normal rental situation where you have to be 25. So it could greatly reduce the number of students bringing cars, has all these other benefits, and we never had a conversation with the town, which seemed like would have been another good thing. Like,
I
if
never
Sharon
heard
had
of
to go
that.
somewhere, could she just sign out a car and we don't have to have
Yeah, I think that
crematories
should
and other
definitely be
things?
in there, because I know a lot of these zip car type companies do have campus enterprises already set up, the model's already there.
They were ready to come. They were at the
Oh, they
time.
were,
And the university said, well, we just signed a new rental agreement with Enterprise, and it kind of ended there. But maybe it's worth having in here to have another conversation. I mean, the Enterprise Center might be interested in something, I don't know. But,
It doesn't hurt to have that stuff in there.
and they start with like 1, 2, or 2 cars and see how popular it is, and they
Wow,
grow it
that's
from
great.
there. You don't have to have, there's no upfront cost, like,
Now, is that located at the university? Or?
could be. It could be located, or you could have a couple of spots, like the town could say, we'll provide 1 parking spot out here. And so anytime that Brian or Sharon had to go to Concord, they could sign it out and the car may be here unless they already signed it out. But
Or we
you just
carpool.
pay for the hours that you're using it, like a rental car. You don't pay insurance, they clean it, gas is paid for.
Wow.
One of the service people for Zipcar is located in Plymouth. So, I don't know. And it seems like that's changing pretty quick, the whole car sharing piece, so. That was my only additional thought.
Yep, no, perfect. I'll throw that in there.
Good point, Mr.
It's a
Whitman.
few extra characters, so that might be a little bit more
Oh,
money.
yeah.
Call it a bonus.
Yeah.
To an extra
You
10
know, this
bucks.
whole section on railroad, railroad stuff.
So, public transportation, airports, we kind of hit on, railroads, we kind of hit on. I don't know what, I kind of probably overstepped some of what might be palatable for Plymouth as far as railroads. Considers potential expansion of use of rail line when developing roadway plans, and part of that was, you might need some different turning radiuses going into areas where the rail line could be heavy, stuff like that.
I agree with Frank very much so, and I always have, because of my background in transportation, but for a very small town, which is also a university town, we are very lucky. We do have a lot of attributes, and by and large, they're fairly underutilized. I mean, some towns would kill to have, an operating airport and public transportation, 2 or 3 levels of it already in place. I mean, we really,
We have a heliport.
pardon?
We have a heliport.
Yeah, right, yeah.
The only problem is in Plymouth, when we talk about items along the railroad, most of the railroad are in the flood zone.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you can't really
Right, you're right.
put any businesses or anything like that there, so that's sort of a pipe dream on that one.
Well, no, but I mean in terms of just for trails or
Oh, yeah,
rail
trails.
trails or,
There again, trails and kayaks and canoes don't bring
oh, I know.
New
But
Hampshire very
I'm
much
just talking
money.
about utilizing what we have.
Restaurants.
Side rails,
They don't.
as far as you can construct a side rail along the Pemmy, used for the tourists, the people that own cars. They come up and they park on there, and as long as you're not building a structure, you could put that in there without, you just can't build a building in that floodway. But you can build
Sure.
a side rail. That's economic development where you attract tourism in that form of transportation. And we have many places to do that.
Or even freight, if there's areas in close proximity to the rail line outside the floodplain, you could create warehousing, or not even that, just have offloading in the trucks.
Right, and in fact, Main Street of Plymouth is in the flood zone.
Yeah, same thing with Lancaster, yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So I don't know if this is something that some of those things in the rail were things you would want to keep in, whether they make any sense for you. Like I said, I wasn't that familiar with the rail line and what the hopes are for that, so.
So what is the likelihood of like freight coming down to?
Well, I mean,
Where's the stoppage points? Like,
it would be a secondary route, because your main routes are, the Concord, Dover,
well, if
Portland
they're
area.
planning on coming down from north anyway, though.
I mean, connectivity,
They're going down from the north and over to Gorham.
Right, they're
Yeah,
going
they're not-
down
they're
the
not
east
coming here.
side.
All right.
yeah.
But
I wonder if the consider and the create bullets under railways, if there's maybe one that says, like, investigate or study, like, look into the feasibility of where these rail spots would be and the
Yeah,
likelihood.
it would be long-term connectivity, and it would be secondary connectivity, but as we said before, if you let a rail corridor go, you're
Oh, yeah.
never gonna get it back.
We
You
have
can't afford to.
some light
And-
tourism
yeah,
rail now,
right.
and maybe that's the
But
limit of it.
the problem on that is, that has to be a regional type thing.
Yes, yes. it
Because Plymouth is dead in the waters if we only build a railroad
Oh,
in the
understood.
limits of Plymouth.
Right.
So-
North of Plymouth and
so
south of Plymouth.
we could say that we
talked
could
about it.
cooperate with a regional plan,
Right.
but I don't see where
You've got active
Plymouth
rail
could
lines
plan
in
until
Lincoln.
hell freezes over, and you're not going to get anywhere.
No, I agree, but with every regional plan, there's an individual plan in place too. So if you create your own individual plan for what you would like to see the rail in your town, then that can help any regional plan that's created. And-
Right.
Because you can say that, well, this is what we have already in place. We already have identified what we have and what we could, how we could expand it, and then it could help create or further the regional plan from there.
Right, but the problem that I find with the railroad is, number one, the railroad was discontinued years ago because it was a non-profitable thing. And the reason it was unprofitable in the state of New Hampshire is because the railroad played a real pansy and went up through Vermont, so that way New Hampshire didn't have any freight, so they decided to do away with the rail. And at that point, the government has always had to subsidize railroads. So, you know, it's just saying, well, we'll build a railroad and then you're gonna have to pay extra money, and Plymouth is strapped with taxes anyway, so
Right.
I don't.
Frank, you have a comment?
On this railroad development, much like Route 25, there's going to be a lot of development on our towns that abound us that would create the demand for use of that transportation structure. So there's a lot of industrial systems out for sale in Rumney that could load up Tenny Mountain Highway, because 50% of your traffic now has nothing to do with the residents of the town of Plymouth. Hampton Sand and Gravel just sold, so that hundreds of acres is going to be redeveloped into we don't know what. But I guarantee you, if there was a manufacturing industrial rate and they wanted to use the railroads, we're going to see a lot of lights going on. So when you do a feasibility study, you look at your demand capacity within yourself, and then your demand capacity of transportation that comes in to you. And you have to stay focused on the demand capacity capability. The design and funding is another subject. You don't do that at the beginning. You have to do the proper feasibility study on it. So a lot of times people get confused between trying to address the issue of Tenny Mountain Highway or the railroad utilization rate, looking at what we have in Plymouth. And there is no justification other than a tourist attraction for railroads in Plymouth. There's just not a real estate. So, but what we're going to get impacted is other towns using that, and we have a piece that they're going to be utilizing it. So what's that going to do to us? That's what comes up in demand capacity evaluation.
All right, so how do we address this in the master plan? I guess that's the real.
Having an action that says we'll look into it, we'll investigate it, so
Right.
we can have those conversations, John's point about looking at what's happening outside of Plymouth, but also have a
And not
component
let-
that's in Plymouth.
Let the corridors go, so to
Right,
speak.
and preserve the
Oh,
corridors.
we've let a lot of the corridors go anyway, because
Well,
the
right,
state
but I
highway
mean-
goes right up through where the corridor used to be.
Have an awareness of them and not just tear it down or infill it or whatever.
So I could take out, as Steve said, the bullets, the consider bullets and those underneath, and the create bullets and those underneath. Keep the top two and add another bullet, just say, study the feasibility of either the expansion of the rail or the reutilization of the rail line within the town and regionally.
That's great.
Yeah,
All right,
keep it simple.
so I'll cut those last two out and add that one.
No, it's good now.
That's it, unless there's any other questions. I mean, there's other strategies I could throw in, which I didn't until I talked to you, as far as, redevelopment of roadways. Steve and I talking when he came in about developing a complete, or adopting a complete streets ordinance, where when you rebuild a street, you have to do the whole thing, sidewalks, roadway, green space, all that stuff. Make it
Beautiful.
beautiful for everybody.
Well, and it
Not just
came,
a paved area.
I mean, I remember 15 years ago, Bill Hool saying, like, why would you go and fix a street and then the next year go back and fix a sidewalk? Like, it just means, it's
narrow street.
coordination, like you said, too, across departments.
Yeah.
So Ben, what's this other document here?
That's basically all the fluff that the list came out of.
It's the data.
Yeah, it goes with that,
It's
yeah.
data.
Is this the first chapter, I apologize, is this the first chapter we've received? It would seem, right? I thought so. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss
It
it.
is? Yeah.
Yeah.
She did throw me to the wolves, didn't she? Oh, my goodness.
I told you.
You wanted to start strong.
Yeah, she,
No, she didn't. She said, I can only go up from here.
Right, she said,
Trial by fire.
she had
said she
editorial
wanted to soften
changes, but
this
this will
up.
be fine, is what she said, so. That was fine, that's good.
That's good. So,
we're good.
you're good? All right.
Still, you got your
Appreciate
hair.
it.
Ben.
So I'll incorporate some of those things and get that to Tara, and she'll probably get it to you. I don't know if I'll be back, but I certainly can if you wish for me to.
This was
Oh, you're
great.
ready to work on the next chapter. See what the next chapter is.
Hope it's not the prologue again. All right. Well, if you guys need to contact me, Sharon knows
I've
how to
got
reach
the,
me.
yeah.
Steve knows how to reach me too. Gentlemen, thank you. Have a
Thanks
happy
so much,
holiday.
Ben.
And
It's
you.
good to see you.
Nice to
Thank
see
you.
Would you like one of these?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, I have some new, old, unfinished business.
My agenda. Thanks. I think I would have one. Oh, by the way, just before we get started,
thanks for that.
this is important. This is
yeah.
next year's schedule of meetings, just to anticipate.
Write
Yeah.
these in.
That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
What?
This shows that we actually do something.
New revised, yeah, oh, good.
Actually, could I have a spare? Because I always mark one up and keep one for the, Yep.
So the first 3 pages here are the work that we did. And these are definitions that either did not exist, were contradictory, or needed to be revised. The initials at the end of each little definition is the person that worked on it. I have, before we get to the ADU part, I do want to talk a little bit about the bed and breakfast definition. And I kind of looked in the Planner's Dictionary, and it was all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
Some towns said you have to have at least 4 bedrooms. Some said you had to have 2. Some said you couldn't have more than 10. So my question is, before I ask my question, actually, so there's 2 things that I cite here, and those are both definitions that come from the state of New Hampshire. One refers to food service, and the other refers to alcohol. So they're slightly different, but the key thing is that it's transient, it's occupied by the owner. So my question is, do we want to talk about the number of rooms, or does that not make any difference to anybody?
Well, I think, I don't know, do you think we should have a limit? Because you don't want or some language or something?
Well, you want to confuse it with a hotel or motel.
Right, exactly, you don't want to, you don't want a B and B that's actually operating as a hotel. Or-
So maybe an upper limit,
I beg your pardon?
maybe an upper limit.
Yeah,
That seems better.
yeah, not a minimum, but an upper limit, because I'd hate to see that. Sorry, but for all these years, I'm paranoid about, uses morphing into something that's not appropriate and totally becomes something else.
I just worry about picking an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
And not anticipating some of the larger structures in town that could maybe churn into a bed and breakfast that might hold 12 rooms, and do we really care if it can hold 12 rooms?
Well, then it kind of gets to be, well, I know we have to look at the
I don't want to name any
specifics.
specific
Rooming
structures,
house.
but
How many rooms does that place have in Hebron with all the lights on? I mean, that's a big structure.
Oh, yeah. Pasconian, I don't know what they call it now, but it used to be
oh, by the lake.
Pasconian, yeah.
Because that's a big building. That has a lot of bedrooms, but I think it's a bed and breakfast.
I don't know.
Frank, do you have a comment?
Yes, I think you want to look up other reference besides the state's definition is the International Building Code specification definition and the fire codes. And I believe I can't quote it because I can't remember the page, but it's somewhere around 10. And the other thing you have to look at, what you can do, is we're talking a bed and breakfast of an existing structure. Because if you're going to build one from scratch, you're building it for today's standards, and you're talking having it in the right zone, setbacks, and all the other issues that deal with land use. So we're talking about, most bed and breakfasts are homes that are converted, they're multi-rooms. But to get an actual figure of limits, I believe it's either International Building Code or the Life Safety Code has the definition of bed and breakfast and a number.
You look at, in the planner's dictionary, there was a wide spread.
Yeah.
There was,
You-
some towns, you couldn't have a bed and breakfast unless the building was at least 50 years old. For example, that was some town in Idaho, so
Now,
it's all over the board. And Frank, maybe there is some specificity we can look at there.
The biggest issue with the bed and breakfast versus a hotel or motel, when you file for a business in Concord as a bed and breakfast, that is a specific 5-digit code system in the North American classification system. And so your insurance and your legal elements to do business is based on what you filed in Concord.
Right, well, I looked at the RSA
Yeah.
and searched for bed and breakfast, and it only appears in 2 places in the RSA, and one's in reference to alcohol and the other's in reference to food service, and that's it.
Right.
And the definitions conflict.
we do have a rooming house definition, and it says that threshold is a facility, living accommodations without kitchens rented to at least 5, but not more than 16 guests. So is that where that number 4 came up, below that threshold? I'm just asking the question.
No, that 4 came from the
Arbitrary.
liquor, that's from the liquor regulations.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because we don't want it to be end so high that,
So do we need to pick a number? That's the first question. Aaron says yes. What does everybody else say?
If we have to pick a number, I like the first definition better, and I like Frank's idea if we could see that it was in one of those other codes, if there was a number that, at least we have a rational basis.
All right, so we'll look at the National Building Code and the National Fire Code and see. Does anybody have access to the fire code? Do we?
well,
Because you don't, as a private individual, you do not have access. You do.
You
I'm
keep
a member
your,
of the National Fire Protection Association.
Okay, so you have the NFPA.
so ask Frank to get the number.
I can bring the book down,
Okay, that'd be great.
and I have the International Building Code, but your code enforcer's got.
Yeah, Brian's got that.
All right, so we'll look at that. Other than that, this is basically what you guys sent me.
Can I ask if people who use, say, Airbnb or other apps qualify under bed and breakfast? I mean, how does that work?
That's kind of undefined as if it's a new territory, it's a brave new world, I don't know.
I'll brave, but
It's interesting you asked that, because it came up on the planner's
yeah,
listserv
yeah,
just
okay.
yesterday.
Yeah,
And a couple towns have started to flirt around with how do you do it, but it's a matter of like, how do you police it?
yeah.
Yeah, how would you?
You know, I'd have to go on, Brian would have to go on and see who's listing their
I mean, it's
place.
Big
and
Brother.
Most towns have kind of stayed away from it.
Yeah, but that's a very good point, because that's where the
It is, yeah.
technology is going. So, let's try to get B and B down first.
Well, there's another thing, I mean,
Okay.
Airbnb requires the owner be in residence and.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, if they only have a 2-bedroom house and they're a single person, and they want to rent the other bedroom on Airbnb, if you have to have 4 rentable rooms, then, I mean,
No, yeah, so I don't think that, there's no,
There shouldn't be a minimum,
correct.
No,
and they're probably not gonna come in to ask for permission to do it. They just go ahead and do their Airbnb, and I don't know that we wanna track them down anyway, so.
It's easy to track them down now. Just go on to Airbnb and
Now,
see them all dots on maps, so.
I mean, that'd be a
It could
state,
It could be like an Airstream on someone's property, too.
Oh, totally. I
So-
mean, it's,
the state's losing the tax revenues, so the state's
Yeah.
gonna have to address this.
Yep, and we are too, for that matter.
rooms and meals, yep. Yeah, because
Anyway.
we get an
All right.
allotment. so.
And actually, the New Hampshire Municipal Association was gonna kind of like, address that, but they didn't.
okay.
Okay, that was the question I had. The rest of these are pretty straightforward.
Could I just, excuse me for interrupting, but bed and breakfast means a building or buildings regularly used. Shall we say residences? I mean, that's implicit, isn't it? Residential buildings.
Oh, I think we're gonna go with the first definition. There's 2 definitions there.
Okay,
They're
yeah,
pulled from the
right,
state,
okay.
so we're
So
gonna go
just
with
totally bag the second one?
transient lodging facility, owner occupied,
Yeah. keep
in
it
which the
simple,
only meal
stupid.
served is breakfast. And if it's not breakfast, then the state comes into play anyway.
Yeah.
Then it's a
right,
restaurant.
Right. And if
They
you're
serve breakfast at 6 o'clock in the evening, or?
you serve alcohol at breakfast? Well,
Some do.
if it's brunch.
What a concept.
We have a different schedule.
This is why planners lose their minds eventually, because it's just, right?
You could try that for one of our planning board meetings.
Oh, dear God, no.
Okay,
Would lose your mind?
so
Eventually.
we're going to move on to the proposed accessory dwelling unit, the last page.
Yep.
And this is the consensus of what came out of our last meeting, for those of you that weren't there. Basically, it was, we were not going to restrict it to being attached. We weren't going to allow more than 2 bedrooms, and weren't going to allow more than 1,000 square feet.
I'm sorry, did you say we?
We're not going to allow more than 1,000 square feet.
No, restrict it to attached. We are restricting it. No, we are not.
We're not.
Because I asked you that earlier, maybe didn't understand the question.
We got our wires crossed.
Okay.
That, at least that was my memory of the consensus, was that we were not going to require it to be attached. Now Sharon and Brian had some additional thoughts. And I'm going to read these out to you and for your opinions. I think this needs to be discussed with the full board as well at the next meeting, but we'll at least get some of this on the table here.
I have copies of this,
Oh, you do?
yeah.
Okay.
I just didn't know who would get to this. so. Oops, that's the wrong one. Way too much paper.
So these are just the suggested changes?
Was that?
Last,
Suggested changes to what we're looking at?
Addendum.
you
Addendum.
stole that last time. You gave me
Well,
one.
I know I did. I didn't realize that. I
Hey,
was gonna
Steve,
do it.
can we circle back just before we get started, just because I'm so anal about process? Accessory dwelling unit. The definition
Yes.
is a residential living unit that is within or attached to a single-family dwelling. I think if you're going to say,
Oh, we have to fix that.
or standalone, you need to have that in there.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Yeah, that needs to be fixed.
Or us, or what's the phraseology in the, oh, what does it say? It says blah, blah, blah. Detached, detached.
Or next.
Or detached.
Or detached. Attached or detached, we're gonna add or detached.
It's when, or attached slash detached.
Okay, so let's go down to section 2, the last thing that suggested addendum. Commercial will be occupied by more than one person per bedroom unless under family-related occupancy is defined in Article 3 of the zoning ordinance. As a college student who was living with my girlfriend, I would really object to that.
Yeah, no, or just,
Yes, but do you want 3, if you have 2 bedrooms with an ADU, do you want 3 unrelated people in each bedroom, so you essentially, and I'm being devil's advocate here, was our concern, do you want 6 additional people living in that ADU?
Well, 3 people in a bedroom is a little unusual. 2 is.
No, but I have to be devil's advocate here,
Right.
because
Well,
you
I
know the issues we have with enforcement.
And I mean, college kids live in dorms with 2, 3, 4 people in the same room, right? So,
If it's a 1,000 square foot unit, you could get 2 pretty nice sized bedrooms and throw a couple bunks in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the concern.
No, I mean, I'm just talking about going beyond the premise of what this is about.
Right.
Why the law was created to, essentially affordable housing or, a safety valve, if
Right.
you will. So I just think it's important for the board to consider that. No,
So opinions on
but
that?
let's can we just look at the definition for family unrelated?
Sure.
One of these days, I'm gonna have to start wearing my glasses at night with these lights. Tonight, oh, gosh.
Well, Sharon looks for that, because I think in your scenario, Steve, 2 bedrooms, if you and your girlfriend were living there in this unit, you would equal out to one person per bedroom.
No, I'd go 2 people per bedroom.
Yeah,
You
2
would.
feet of it.
3, I would be willing to say no more than 2, but I don't think you can restrict it to 1. That's my personal opinion.
No, but I'm afraid of 3. At first, well, when Brian and I first did this, we said 2.
Right.
And we thought we would do the inverse.
Then what happens if these two have a kid?
Well, that becomes a
Any member of the
family-related, related does not necessarily mean by marriage, it means by family association or blood. So we've gotten into that whole,
But is that in reference to the people that own the house or the people that are in the accessory
no,
dwelling?
Accessory.
ADU.
Okay.
Yeah.
ADUers,
Family, unrelated. Okay, well, family-related, because I think that's what we cited first. Any number of persons related by blood or marriage or adoption living together. Well, we got to change that too, because family now is defined differently. Living together as a single household unit. Family unrelated says any group of 3 persons or less not related by thus, and such living together. So it gives you the wiggle room with or less, but it's still, somebody could call you on it, and I don't know. I mean, this is uncharted territory again, because it's a brand-new RSA. This is a college town. I don't mean to be paranoid, but we have a lot more factors in dealing with this than some.
How old is that reg that you're talking about?
Oh, I have no idea, because unfortunately, before I got here, anytime anything changed, nobody ever put the date on it.
Well, the only problem I find on that is, in the last 5 years, the world has changed.
Well, that's what I meant, yeah, you can't
Yeah,
even
you're
say,
right.
yeah. No, non-traditional families, gender, the whole thing, yeah, it's hard to define it.
okay, so what's the consensus on the number of people?
2.
2 per bedroom.
2?
I can live with that.
2, okay. So we're
So,
gonna say
shall we say not be occupied by more than,
2, each bedroom, by more
Oh,
than 2.
no.
unless under family related, because you
Right.
have to put the kids in there, okay.
Now, so that brings us to part 2. Do we want to go and change the definition of family unrelated in the zoning as well?
It'd be an opportunity to do it.
This would be both of them, because they are definitely not correct.
Okay, so we're gonna work on that between now and December 15th, you and me.
Sure,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it's just generic, but we know what we can't be discriminatory.
Right.
So, yeah.
So we're gonna do that.
No, unless you want to.
D, the addendum on D. Letter H. And we have some opinions on that.
Let me just FYI, let me just get what this says. Go ahead, and I'll, when
I think that's a
find it,
nice addition.
Yeah.
It is, but, say if you have like a building looks kind of like a garage back there, that's actually like a room, and it may not look at all like the house. It's
Well, it's, maybe
kind of like a judgmental thing.
the phraseology is,
Already-
yeah, but on the other hand, do you want a tar paper shack? And I know we don't have design standards, but I'm trying to find it, there is some language
Does at
in here.
least put a message out there for people to consider the appearance, even though it's, leaves
I
it wide
prefer to
open.
make it a suggestion than a requirement, because I don't think it's enforceable.
I mean, if the
Okay,
garage is
here we
already
go.
out, then
Here we go, if I could read
new
this.
construction though, you know what I mean?
If-
Go ahead.
Does that make a difference?
If I could read this.
Direct them.
Municipalities, this is from OEP. Municipalities have some discretion in determining the conditions, blah, 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 blah. The provisions to regulate the appearance of the ADU may include design standards that maintain continuity with the look, that's subjective, of the primary dwelling unit. Maybe we could just have, as you said, some suggestive language in there with this, it's,
So do we change the shall to should?
yeah.
So then it's a
Are
recommendation?
encouraged to, or, may, or not may, may is
You
too
can't
iffy.
control how houses look in town, so I guess,
I mean, if I have my nice little Greek revival house, and I decide to put a little Victorian next to it,
Right.
it's not gonna be the same architectural style at all.
no, it's
No,
true.
but if you put
But
a
I
tar
feel like
paper shack, it's gonna
Right, but
reduce the aesthetics of
we
your.
don't regulate tar paper shacks, right, outside of health and safety.
No, but aesthetically, I mean, it's the subjective thing, this, like we said, this is uncharted,
Yeah, I
so.
don't think we want to get into design
Right.
I don't want to get into the design
No,
issues
you
at all,
can't.
frankly.
Can't.
No,
No way.
The tar paper shack is an incomplete structure, and you only have 1 year or 2 years to complete your structure. So that's your rationale on your tar paper shack.
well, I'm being
think she was-
facetious in
she
that
was being,
term,
you
but
know-
you know what I'm saying.
A metaphor there for,
But there are certain architectural structures like dome houses and all this other stuff that would take down the value of neighboring houses in the neighborhood. That would be my concern.
Well, I mean, whatever, but we can,
Underground house.
we won't even talk about whether this is going to require site plan.
okay, what I would suggest we do on this is that we, at the next board meeting, we get a consensus or a vote on the board as to whether we want to include that language or not.
Maybe some advisory language without going too crazy.
Well, I think we should do that, and I think if you changed the shall to should and changed residential structure to neighborhood, it opens it up a little bit
There
more.
you go.
I mean, the idea of an accessory dwelling unit is you could have additional units to address the workforce housing needs that you mentioned, Sharon, but you don't really know they're there.
I mean, right, exactly. If we, and that's part of the whole acceptance and premise of this, is if it blends, no one is up in arms.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to say should, and then we're going to use the word neighborhood, correct?
Yeah,
All right, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, no, that's a
as a
little more,
partial
that's,
compromise, but if it goes
kinder and
away, I can live
gentler.
with that too.
Okay,
yeah. That's just a reminder. Some
Yeah.
people don't, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
okay, number 3, is that redundant, or do we need that?
Well, again, it's cautionary. It's implicit, you know,
Do we already have a 75% rule?
we do. But it's just a reiteration. Shall not exceed more than 75% impervious coverage of a lot in combination with the existing structures. It's
That's the
just
same,
so,
right?
yeah, it's a reflexive back so people don't
Right.
do plans come in and I've got to be Debbie Downer and say,
Yeah, I agree.
It's good.
you know, it's just cautionary.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to overregulate this because this is brand new and personally and professionally, I want to see how this flies for a while. We may have to tighten this up or do other things, you know, in other
No, but
years.
I totally agree with you, because that way, someone that's planning to do this can look and say, oh, I forgot about that.
I mean, and then when they come in and talk to Brian and I, that's when we say, okay, this is where you can go to the ZBA and perhaps get a special exception if it's site-specific and acceptable. But these are the implementation parts of this whole thing that we haven't got to yet, so.
Okay, so what we'll do, we'll work on the family-related
Yep.
business. We'll reconvene on.
Related and unrelated.
We'll reconvene on ADU on the December 15th meeting. And on the rest of these, I would like to move these forward in the process. So, I don't know if this means they go to the town attorney next, or,
we give them whatever a blessing you want. They're just a preliminary blessing to send them to the town attorney. Once he comes back, then we have to hold a public hearing.
okay, so can I have a motion to send these to the town attorney for his opinion?
So moved.
Got a second?
With the edits that we proposed as far as, yeah, a second.
Okay. Any
Yeah.
objections? Okay, we're gonna do that.
We're also going to want to include related and unrelated. So can we try to
Yes.
do that all at once?
Oh, send it to them all
Yeah,
at once.
because this is a busy time. So maybe we
We're gonna have
could do
the,
this next
well,
week.
So you wanna postpone it until after the December 15th meeting?
Postpone
I think
it.
you can.
You mean sending it to the attorney?
Because we have the ADU to consider
Yeah,
finally.
yeah,
You wanna send it all at once after the December 15th meeting?
yeah. It's going to be December 15th before you know it.
Or can we just send, with the change to the family definition, can we just send all the definitions forward?
I'd almost prefer to do that.
Get it started? Okay,
Yeah,
all
because-
right, okay.
And then follow up with
We
the
can't
ADU
forget to do this,
right after
yeah.
because the ADU is pretty short.
Okay, so that's, we had a motion, we had a second, and if there are no objections, we're gonna send these to the attorney.
Okay,
After
are we
you-
not doing any more work on these? I have too much paper, as written, not the ADU, but the other ones that those are all kosher tonight?
We just need the bed and breakfast one updated based on the code
Yeah.
and the addition of the change in the family definition that you mentioned.
So you and I will do that.
Those are the only
Right.
two.
Okay, so
We
we're
could
gonna,
bang that out real quick.
Yeah.
If we have a quick meeting with Brian, the three of us, 45 minutes, boom, it's nothing. And then we'll wait on, Frank's gonna get that other information, incorporate
Okay.
that.
all right, so we're gonna, let's do that motion again.
Yeah,
So I'd like to have a motion that Steve and Sharon will rework the unrelated family definition, finalize
the two of them, related and unrelated.
finalize the definition of bed and breakfast with Frank's assistance from the NFPA regs, and then we will submit them to the town attorney to review. To that effect?
No move.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Consistency.
If there are no objections, that's what we'll do. That's done.
So, in the interim, let me just make sure I have this clarified. In the interim, those definitions that you just passed out.
Yeah.
Outside of those three.
Yeah.
Can go now.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other new business? Any other comments from the public before we call it a night?
No.
Thanks for your help tonight, Frank. Much appreciated.
Right.
Do I have a movement to adjourn?
Second.
Oh, wait, who said what? No, who said what?
Unanimous second.
Who said what?
John beat me to it.
I moved.
John second. I tried.
I did something.
You have more practice than me.
I got
Not due.